see how this one goes. Hopefully not as long or as poorly edited as the last one seemed to be. I'm trying to think of things to do, maybe keep the channel current. So this one will be something interesting, or something just to pass the time. We'll see how it goes, God willing. First up is the Fenwell Metropolitan Bar, which is based next to Baker Street Tube Station. In fact, it sits over it. The Met was opened years ago, initially as sort of offices and interview space for the London Underground, now part of Transport for London. Good old days of London Transport are long gone behind us. But the Met Bar is ingrained in the psyche. It was where I went to on my first night in Halls in 2005 at the Uni of Westminster, which is across the road and just adjacent. And me and my mates from the 13th floor virtually kept this place going, it seemed. And it wasn't until maybe once in that interim, and then not properly that I remember anyway, till 2017 that I turned to it. And I've been in it a few times with the tour job because of when I was doing the Orange route. Needless to say, it's a Wetherspoons, so it is what it is. And the trouble with the Met Bar, I find, is that it's quite noisy. There's no music, but all those people on all the seats that you see can contribute to an incredible amount of noise. But it's still here. And so we'll hop across the road to the Globe. Now, the Globe has been around for quite some time, on the end of Marylebone Road, the junction with Baker Street at that. And when it gets busy, it gets busy. But usually everyone's having to stand outside. Again, it was a pub after I discovered that uni with my mates. And one of my most embarrassing moments was when we were rather short of cash towards the end of our time at Halls because of student loans and winding down and everything. And we said, well, we got to get out of Halls for doing with fishing and that. And I had a thing for Guinness back then, so I asked for a pint of Guinness, and he said it was X amount of pounds, and I had this change, and I said, well, what does that get me? And he produced this tiny little glass and managed to pour, it wasn't even a half pint, I think it was a quarter pint, and I sat down and I thought, fuck me, and that still cost me like £3 or £4. The Globe's still ticking along. Like the Met Bar, is awfully quite popular with the commuter types who are not going home straight away because it's across the road from Baker Street and it's just down the road from Marylebone Station. But Marylebone's got a pub and a sports bar in it, and there's a pub on Balcombe Street, so it's not exactly marooned. But the Globe's still here, unlike the Apollo down on the edge of Paddington Street, which was knocked down when Boris was finishing up his mail term. There's now car parks and fancy flats, apparently. And it was opposite the building on Chiltern Street where they filmed Sliding Doors. I believe Gwyneth Paltrow lived in it, apparently. So there you go. That's Marylebone. Check out Eva. Depends what your mood is, really. We'll go into the Old Bell. We've gone on the Bakerloo and Central lines to get to St Paul's Cathedral. We've just walked down Ludgate Hill and up on the end of Fleet Street before it reaches Ludgate Circus is the Old Bell, which, if you saw the first video I did for this history lark, was said to have been built by Christopher Wren after the Great Fire, so the workers of St Paul's Cathedral had somewhere to sleep, eat and drink and be merry, one assumes. And then in the 20th century it was the haunt of the Daily Express journos. Each pub on Fleet Street effectively had some kind of paper loyal. In the cellars, which no one's allowed to go, can get down into unless you ask nicely, I suppose, is meant to be sort of like a dividing wall, I think they said it was, or at least the edge of a wall, from the old pub that predated the Great Fire, and they reckon the wall or the bricks are over 700 years old nowadays. It's a tight and small pub because we ran a tall race back in the day, but on that, it's worth checking out if you can. I went in there with my brother just before Christmas, November time, and I'd say we were lucky to get a table, and that was about 6-7 o'clock. It's not the kind of pub on Fleet Street that people stand in front of because you'll take out the pavement, so people go to the other one, the Sugar and Loaf, I think it is. So check out the Old Bell. It feels ancient inside of it, but I imagine it's been refurbished a few times since the Great Fire, and indeed and the Blitz, and I dare suggest it might change again. It's between two ugly modern buildings. One's a kiosk and the other I can't remember now. But like I say, try and check it out. And you might be lucky to bump into an old journo willing to tell a few tall tales like journos tried to do. The next one takes us all the way out to what is, I guess, technically the East End of London, and sort of Shadwell / Wapping. It's meant to be Wapping, but Shadwell is only a foot away from it seems, and that's the Prospect of Whitby. It opened originally as the Tavern, and then the Devil's Tavern it was known, and it's said to have opened in 1520, and they claim to be the oldest pub, if not on the riverside, maybe in all London, certainly one of the oldest pubs. It has, on the riverside, a replica hangman's noose reflecting what used to happen down here back in the day until about the early 19th century. Prisoners were brought chiefly for Newgate Prison in what is now the City, and squeezed past the pub to the shoreline where they were hanged, and then displayed sometimes in giblets, where essentially the tide comes up, takes over the body, and when the tide comes down, the body's rotting and it's on display like a cage. Captain Kidd was executed here in this manner. There's one reason why just down from the pub is still known as Execution Dock, and as far as I'm aware, no one's tried to use the hangman noose, hopefully. But it's worth checking out. I mean, I found it when I decided to go up Wapping to try and check out the Riverside community, the Riverside, see how it's changed after reading Peter Ackroyd's book about the Thames. And the area is vastly different now. It's mostly, it seems, millionaire flats just down from the pub. But it's a rather tight, small little pub. Again, like the Old Bell, it's reflecting its age. And on the front of the pub is a nice sort of sign with all the monarchs that have been on the throne since the pub opened. So it starts off with Henry VIII. It's feeling it in places. I've only been in it once, but it was quite fun in its way. And then you're carrying on to the Tower of London, walk on down 5 so minutes walk if you've got the pace, gets you past Wapping train station, and then you get towards the Wapping police station, the oldest police station in London, effectively, because it's where the River Police were founded. And you get to the town of Ramsgate, which again claims to be an old enough pub, but only from 1758. And it's said to be where Graham Norton or some such comes. Graham Norton comes to one of these pubs. And I was asked once if I knew where Graham Norton lived, because he's meant to live in this vicinity, but I don't. But both pubs, you can squeeze down the alleyway past them and get onto the shoreline, which people like to do, at low tide anyway, to see if they can find something like some sort of, treasure, I suppose. It's smaller than what it once was. The buildings next to it are largely old warehouses, and that's the beauty, as it were, of Wapping, is that there's still some of these warehouses left, but they're not warehouses anymore. They're all homes, by and large. A share, apparently, brought one for £10 million back in the day. I don't know if he still lives there. But you see, if you're not going to go out to Wapping, you can see some of it from Tower Bridge, but it's not a great view because Wapping's just sort of on the bend of the river. You can see Rotherhithe and the church spire from Tower Bridge, and Wapping will be across the road from it. Again, I've only been in it once during the World Cup of 2018. Wasn't it, when we got to the semi, and they were showing France Argentina, so I didn't pay much attention, sadly. Again, worth a look. You're not too far from Tower Bridge, so if the weather's behaving itself, you can walk to Tower Bridge, Tower London, in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, if you know. Fairly straightforward. So that's one great pub. And why it takes you now to northwest London. How I came across the old Swiss Cottage, or the old Swiss Cottage, is a roundabout way, really. It's a combination of the fact that I was trying to tick off Jubilee Line train stations, another thing, and also I wanted to go off the beaten track, and then I saw a YouTube video done by a chap called Jeff Marshall about tube stations named after pubs, and Swiss Cottage was the last one. I looked it up on the map and realised that it's a fairly straight. If I went there, I could walk down the Finchley Road through St John's Wood, Baker Street, Marylebone in about 10-20 minutes, depending on how I am. Or I'm only 2 minutes on the tube, really. So I went and there properly end of January, I think, and by the time the tour bus job round up, I had accumulated 20-30 visits maybe. It's a curious pub, really, because for a start, from when it was built in the early 1800s in the style of a Swiss chalet, it started the urbanisation around it in a weird way, or at least the urbanisation of the countryside was coming apace anyway. It was coming out of Hampstead and whatnot, and the pubs sprung up, and then the neighbourhood came around, sort of took shape. The tube station was built just technically ahead to the north of it, but as a perk of the tube station, its third exit brings you right in front of the pub, more or less. It still looks like a Swiss chalet. It's owned by a chain who's I can't remember now, and it's a curious pub in the sense that it has signs up at the bar anyway saying it's a digital-free pub, it's a digital detox pub. They want to encourage conversations, blah, blah, blah. And if you look at one closely, it lists all the things you can't use or do, like, you can't use a laptop to email, you can't use your iPad, blah, blah, blah. So I went in there and saw this sign the first time, and I was going to ask them, but I thought, well, no. And it's a great pub, therefore, to come and get a reasonably affordable pint, read a book or newspaper. The trouble is, it doesn't seem that this rule is strictly enforced or enforced at all. The amount of times I've been in there and people on their phones or texting, or a guy was watching something on his iPad at the bar with the volume up, I could hear it, and he looked at me for causing noise. I was on a bench that every time I fidgeted, an inch of fidgeting, it creaked like the Titanic on the seabed. So I don't know what, but it's hopefully going to reopen when this business is over. All of these pubs, as I say, are needing our help. I'm not saying, when we get pissed or that, but pubs are closing as it was before coronavirus at a rate of knots, and some of them, like the old Baronet, have pedigree and history. The downside, in a way, of the old Swiss Cottage is that it's small. I went there on one day that was incredibly busy for a Tuesday and was lucky to get a seat. And I usually try and get like a table with 2 chairs because I'm one person, Also, it sits with the Finchley Road running down the side of it. There's a traffic junction at the other side of it. It's not. I had to sit outside once because I couldn't get a table inside, and noisy as hell because of the road. So there's swings and roundabouts. It's where I'm hoping to have my birthday party, so some of you listening might be checking it out soon. At any rate, so we're going to do one more after this. So that was northwest London. Let's get on the Jubilee line down to Waterloo and then get our train out to Wimbledon. The crooked billet was discovered again in a roundabout fashion. It was said growing up that my great-grandparents lived on the edge of Wimbledon Common, and my mum and her sisters and brother with granny and granddad would go out there and have some beat-up fan to see him. And in 2008, after I graduated, I thought I'd go and check Wimbledon out. I came back in 2009, around about at the time of the championships, and decided to walk around the edges of the Common at any rate. And that got me down to, I believe they call it the south side of the Common, and discovered this like little patch of green with a few buildings onto the right of it. And that's the Crooked Billet itself. There's technically 2 pubs. There's the Hand in Hand, and then the Crooked Billet's a house length away from it. I've only ever been in the Billet. I think we tried getting in the Hand in Hand once because we'd gone all the way up to the village to find someone can find a seat. But the Billet is where I first had Pimm's, and I've been there half a dozen or so times. I haven't been since New Year's Eve 2017, New Year's Day 2018, because I spent the night there, but I spent some of it there. But it's said to be where Oliver Reed caused a fair amount of trouble. He used to terrorise all the pubs around there, go on a drinking binge. Prince Charles may have been there. I've seen the photo of him pouring a pint there in that pub and 2 others. The exact same photo, so I don't know if it's accurate. There's meant to be an Irish woman haunting the cellar. And as well, I saw Andy Murray win his second Wimbledon. You can sit, during the summer in particular, of course, you can sit on the grass, providing you use plastic cups. You're allowed to use the deck chairs, which me and a friend could not get going for the laugh of it. I think I fell down, or she did. But either way, it was fun time. And the house before the hand in hand at the top of the billet itself, where it was going for £2 million that day. So that's the indicator of the money. Across the road is the King's School in Wimbledon, where the likes of Robert Graves and many other famous people being educated. The Fay Flash School, it's the Oxford of the area, really. And the billet, it's worth it in the end if you can get a seat at any rate. The closest tube stations is in the air, really. Either Wimbledon Park or Wimbledon itself. Both of them involve a 10-15 minute walk, probably. There's buses 93 to and from Putney. Gets close enough, you can get off at the War Memorial and walk up. And you've got the Common as well. Unfortunately, I've not been back since that time. I always wanted to spend a New Year's in the billet, especially. And went up there. I ended up there about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. And how I got by, I don't know for a start. Because I was by myself. I didn't have the confidence to talk to anyone else. And I was still there at midnight. Joined everyone in watching the fireworks on TV at the Eye. This Australian woman decided to grab me and kiss me, and her husband was there and shook my hand, and I thought, thank God for that. I thought, she says, something, I can't remember. And I thought, I've got to get back to Aylesbury. So I set off, and I broke it down into stages. And the second stage is where I went wrong. I was attacked on the tube coming home. Coming back to Marylebone anyway. But that aside, I'll return one day. I would have gone to it this year if the championships were on, but they've been cancelled for the first time since World War II. So those are my pubs, so to speak. Check out any of them. They're all part of chains now, as I say. And hopefully you haven't minded this one neither. The next ones, I'm thinking maybe Wimbledon or something, if somebody lets me know, or I'll see what inspiration takes me, possibly. Thank you for watching, and if you do have the chance, try and check out at least one of those pubs, because even though they're part of chains now, they need us to keep them going when this madness is over.